Yeah, that's why my hands are so dirty. I was taking that bar off Finnegan's Dock. It won't come out. I've washed my hands with it 10 times.
Yeah, it's amazing. We're ready? All right, thanks, Tom. I'll call the Lakeland Shores City Council meeting November 1st, 2018. Starting time here at 6:30. I'll call it to order. Kim, would you mind taking roll call, please?
Certainly. Councilmember Wilson.
Here.
Councilmember Bischoff.
Here.
Councilmember Kopesky.
Present.
Mayor Zeller.
Here. If you'll join me for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Is there a motion to adopt our agenda?
I'll move that we adopt the agenda.
Is there a second?
I will second.
Call for a vote. All those in favor signify by the sign of aye.
All right.
Aye. No, none opposed. Next item of business here is consent agenda. There's two items. Approve the September 6th City Council meeting minutes that are in our packet and approve the monthly claims. I guess I'd make a motion, but for comment, because I would like to comment on one of the bills in our claims. Is there a second?
Second it.
Okay. So just want to call to everyone's attention that I think it was last week we received an invoice from Lakeland for the median maintenance. And candidly, it was quite a bit more than I expected for two reasons. Last year, we paid our 1/3 share last year was $337.50. And that was the first year that Lakeland, I believe, had taken over the maintenance of the medians. So I guess in knowing that they did it again this year, I was expecting there to be a similar savings. But the total bill came to $5,277.46, of which there's a detail here, and I believe that's in the bill packet as well, which would make Lakeland Shores share $1,758.98. So I did go back just a little bit further, and in 2016 we paid $2,159 as our share, and in 15 we paid $434 as our share. So we seem to be on a bit of a cycle where every other year the bill is considerably higher. So I think for budgeting purposes we should do two things. We should make sure that we have, I would say, at least $1,000 a year budgeted, and then we should probably also figure out some communication with Lakeland for budgeting purposes of what we should be anticipating. They used to go out for bid or for proposal, and I believe we used to approve that. Now they're doing time and materials, and Mr. Stanton is providing a significant amount of that work, and looks like maybe a James Nordstrom, and then Mary Stanton, who I believe is Jim's wife, is also providing quite a bit of the service. So I just want to call it to your attention because for our little budget, that's quite a bit of money.
Well, if there's anything to concur in, I'm kind of shocked by the amount. I go by those medians, and I know they must be spectacular, but for whatever reason I'm so preoccupied with my thoughts I just don't take in the full beauty. And I think it's important that we have a good median, but I'm not sure we need to have one that's quite that good considering our limited budget. And I would like to explore over until next spring, sometime during the winter here, what other options might be to getting this done. First of all, I think $30 an hour for that particular type of work is perhaps a little bit excessive, but everybody's entitled to a living wage, and certainly $50 an hour for that type of work seems to be really excessive. So I would like to explore over the next 5 months before next spring some other alternative to what it is that we're going to do about the median. It's not that I don't appreciate the fact that it looks good, but I do think that we can either do it on a volunteer basis or do it for considerably less money, more in the maybe $600-700 range.
Thanks for your comments, John. So there's two things from my recollection of when I was the mayor of Lakeland and that work was taking place. There was a citizen advisory group that had met for several years, wouldn't you say, Randy? I think you were mayor of Lakeland Shores at the time. And they were the ones that participated with the county in that design. So I want to be sensitive to that work, but I do agree with your comments. Is there a way that we could kind of scale it back a little bit? Because it is a considerable expense. And right now there's 9 planting areas that are relatively modest in terms of the number of species in there, but still, if they're not maintained, they start to look really bad. And I did go out of my way to stop and compliment Mr. Stanton on the fine job they did, because I do think they looked better last year and this year than they had for quite some time. For a while, it was embarrassing how bad they looked. So I do appreciate the work, but from a budget standpoint and an ease of maintenance, I even think if we scaled it back from 9 planting beds to, say, 6 would maybe be a little bit of a compromise. I had suggested that earlier this year, but I was, assured that because Lakeland was doing the work, that the cost would be less and it would be less of an issue. But they must have run into some things this year that cost more money.
Well, I guess that's what I'd like to know. I mean, if this is just a weeding and putting chips around to keep the ground moist during the growing season, that's one thing. But if we're, if they're buying a lot of plants, that's another thing. Well, they can be costly, but and I don't know what the
I don't
what
think I
happens
saw
to
any
the plants.
plants in there.
I think that I don't know that they're buying plants.
No.
This year there was a considerable amount spent on mulch, and that probably is an every 2-year expense where you're replacing the mulch. But I think we just need to have a conversation so that we're better able to budget and better able to understand and explain what's going on. So John, my communication hasn't been very successful lately. As streets commissioner, would you mind?
No, I'd be glad to. Who do you think I should be speaking to, the Honorable Mayor or the right-hand man?
Mr. Stanton is the Public Works Director,
Okay.
so I think I'd start with him.
Okay.
And then we need to confirm with our treasurer what we're budgeting and what we're not. She thought this was coming out of the street improvement budget, and with this expense, it put us over the line item budget this year. So, because she's relatively new with us, we may have to do a little bit more investigating on what account that's been coming out of. Randy, you have a comment?
Do we have a median contract with Lakeland?
No.
Aha.
Like I say, they used to bid the work.
Mm-hmm.
2 years ago, Mayor Glasgow tried to have their clerk communicate with our clerk. We were in transition, and so he called me direct or texted me and said, we want Lakeland Shores to handle this for the next 2 years. So I said, okay, fine, send me a copy of the contract. I can call and schedule the work. Then they said, well, we don't have a contract. So I said, all right, I guess I'll figure it out come spring. And they got on it right away, and they just took care of it. And, I mean, frankly, because it was less than $400, I was okay with it. They're doing a great job. We have to be able to anticipate the expense.
John, if you run into difficulty and things like that, I'd be happy to help you out, but I think that we should at least explore the opportunity to create some type of a contract with them so that we know what we're going after. And they should know, after doing this now for a number of years, they should have a track record of what they've done, what they have been doing, what they should be doing, and what they will be doing. I really do believe that you're right, spot on relative to the mulching, because that's kind of like I do at home. one year's pretty good, the next year, and then the following year. So
Yep.
that kind of makes sense, but you would think that they'd have some type of a schedule. This year we're gonna do this year we're gonna do that, and if they don't, I think that's where having a contract would really be
Or
helpful.
maybe we are responsible for it every third year. If we're covering a third of the bill, I mean, maybe every 3 years, we're responsible for it,
Well,
and 2 years, they're responsible for
I
it.
think the most intriguing question is why is every other year it's so significantly different?
Right.
You know, and I think if we could get an answer to that, you know, like, it doesn't take any work, we don't use any mulch, there's no weeding to be done every other year, whatever the excuse is, then I think we can perhaps, you know, understand and we can put it in our budget every other year that we're gonna have, you know, a significantly more of an expense. But I think at this point, we have no clue as to why it's been every other year
Right,
different.
right.
And it's significantly different. It's not just $200 difference. It's,
Yeah. And for our small budget, that's 1% of the budget right there. More than that. All right. John, I think you also had a question regarding the engineer's bill. If when we get those bills, we're being diligent and tying those back to specific projects and or charging back if they're specific to applications. And generally, I ask that question, and the answer has always been yes, but I think it's worth keeping an eye on it.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments on the consent agenda?
Would that be up to us to keep the eye on it, or our treasurer?
Judy's doing that. Our
Okay,
treasurer's doing
okay,
that.
hopefully she's doing that,
Yep.
okay.
But it's easy enough for her not to know if an I mean, she gets the paperwork and John's billing is pretty specific, but we need to keep an eye on it, just like
Yep,
every
no,
other bill.
makes sense, yep.
All right, I'll call the question on the consent agenda, items A and B. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Public comments. There's no one present. Kim, were there any written comments?
No, there were not, Mayor and council members.
Thank you. Unfinished and new business. Consideration of resolution number 2018-08 regarding the Lower St. Croix Valley Fire Department Pension Fund. Tom, would you like to
Sure.
say anything to this?
I can kind of give you a quick thumbnail on this one. As per the, I'll start with the joint powers. As per the joint powers agreement, we have to in order to increase the pension, we have to have 100% approval from all 5 cities for the ratification of that. So that's why this is on our schedule. They have a guideline set up. We're trying to stay within that guideline. The financial projection towards the end of the year is that will remain at about 118% funding, which should cover any losses, or I should say cover most losses. This is a $250 increase to the yearly benefit of $37.50. Just so everybody understands, if you work for the fire department for 20 years, you get 20 times $37.50 as a one-time payment. If you work there for 10 years, you get $37.50. You get 60% of $37.50 for 10 years. So it's a
Prorated.
Yeah, prorated up to that from, and before 10 years you don't get anything unless there is a, how shall I say this, tragedy. It's more like it's also an insurance policy or disability.
What
So-
other communities have approved it already?
All
All of them?
of them. We are the caboose on this one.
Okay.
So, have any questions? Please fire them away.
I can't remember. I know I was on the city council at the time, Tom, that there was an increase request. Was it 2 years ago or 3 years ago?
I think it was last year.
Last year,
Was it?
we have gone to a, based on the percent funded or coverage of the
right.
liability, we have gone to a yearly request now. And it will be no less than, if we can't get $25, we're not even going to come and ask, or 50, I'm not sure, but it's a pretty minimal amount. But we look at it every year. We see what we can do to keep it within the guidelines of what we have approved as all 5 cities to keep our funding ratio high. And then we go, okay, well, we can afford to give this much. And this year it happens to be $250. Next year it might be nothing. You know, it all depends upon the performance of the investments. Because the only time we as a city are on the hook for any money in here is if 2008 happens again. That's the only time we get caught in that. The market value of our investments drops. State statute says that at that point the cities have to kick in to cover that shortcoming. So what we have in effect done is try to build the
Reserve.
build the process so we cover much more than we actually would need.
And,
Go ahead.
no, I was just gonna ask if there were any
Oh.
questions.
So it's 3,500 now, right? And they want to go
Correct.
3,750.
Yep.
How much will that cost Lakeland Shores?
Nothing.
Because they got the correct funding.
Yeah,
At
that
118.
the income into that investment.
It's in their budget.
It's actually from state fire aid.
Okay.
If you look at your insurance for your houses, there's many of them have a line item that says state fire aid, and that goes to the state, and then the state writes each relief association, not fire department, relief association, a check.
What
Okay.
number does 118.7 need to go down to before Lakeland Shores gets socked? with-
99.
99.
So there were 2 or 3 years that the cities funded the shortage.
Yeah.
Back in
Mhm.
08, 09. Remember, we went up to the Secretary of the State or
Mhm.
Rebecca Otto's office and worked
Yep.
through that. All right. Well, it is what it is. If I appreciate the fact that 4 other cities have approved it. So with that said, I will make a motion that we adopt resolution number 2018-08. Is there a second?
I will second it.
Any additional discussion? We'll call for a vote. Kim, do you want to do roll call, or are you okay with a regular vote?
I'm okay with the regular vote.
Okay. I'll call for a vote. All those in favor signify by the sign of aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Consideration of resolution number 2018-09, Washington County All Hazard Mitigation Plan. Kim, I feel like this is your item.
Mayor and council members, the Washington County Sheriff's Department completed the most recent update to their, the Washington County All Hazard Mitigation Plan. Excuse me. After making the required updates over the past couple of years, the plan was submitted to Minnesota Homeland Security and Emergency Management and then FEMA for approval. Both agencies have approved the plan with no changes. The last step in the plan update is the approval of all the locally by the county board and local city councils and town boards, which is what is being requested today. So the county just needs to move forward and have the final plan approved. All cities need to sign off on it.
And we had previously approved for this work to be started, right? Or this effort to be made?
This is different than the emergency operations plan.
Okay. That's where we were accepting a grant.
This is for the grant for Washington County. The emergency operations plan did not cost the city anything, but the city did to opt into that plan.
Okay. So this is the one I was thinking of, because didn't we have to authorize the application for the grant?
I believe so.
Yes.
Okay. So this is our second look at this.
Yes.
Okay. Any discussion on this one? Well, I'm on a roll tonight. I'll move resolution number 2018-09 for approval. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any additional discussion? Call for a vote. All those in favor signify by the sign of aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes. The next item here is consideration of contract extension, and this is specific to our building inspection services. This is expiring the end of the year. It's the end of a 3+ year contract. I believe if we're not going to extend it, and the extension would be for 2 years, I believe. Is that correct, Kim? If we elect to extend it tonight? Or maybe that's what they're proposing. If we don't extend it tonight, we should probably give notice, because there's a 30-day notice requirement. I had really hoped that Tim was going to be here, because I think he's closest to this issue since he's in the construction industry, and he's expressed some concerns in the past. So here's what I'm thinking. We could give notice, but it doesn't mean we couldn't extend the contract next month if that's what we want to do. If we don't give notice and we don't do anything, we're drawn out into January. I do know there are other inspection options out there, but I think before we decide one way or another, I'd like to hear from Tim, and I'd like to know what those options are. So what I'm proposing is maybe we pass a motion that we're going to give 30-day notice only because we're not ready to commit to a new contract extension until we have a chance to have Councilmember Schroeder here and additional discussion in December. And I believe that our current vendor would also appreciate an opportunity to come and speak to us. Does that seem logical?
Well, it seems logical, but, you know, I wonder whether anything's really going to change in the meantime, okay? I mean, if we really need, you know, if we're all of a sudden going to go out and find, I know there's other options, I guess. I mean, you're saying there is, and so there's no reason for me not to believe that there aren't. But I really wonder whether or not we're just delaying the inevitable.
We could be.
And if somebody feels that's the way we want to go about it, that's fine with me. But if I had my choice, I would, since there hasn't been a whole lot of work put into whether or not the alternative to MinSpec would be any better, at this point, I think, you know, as far as I'm concerned, I just soon go ahead and I just soon go ahead and you know, have the vote tonight on whether we approve the contract or not.
So I appreciate those comments. I do think there is at least one alternative that's providing service to other communities. The other reality that may exist is I don't know if Lakeland's going to renew their contract. And if Lakeland doesn't renew their contract, I don't know if there's enough business in the valley for MinSpect. I don't know if they're still doing Bayport or not. So I think waiting 30 days will have an effect. And I apologize. I maybe could have done a little more legwork. I'd really hoped that Tim would be here tonight and we could talk about it.
That's fine. So let's, as long as we're not jeopardizing our relationship with MinSpect, I don't have any problem with it.
I mean, I suppose the worst case scenario is the contract expires at the end of the year. We have to give 30 days notice. We could give 30 days notice at the first meeting in December, so the contract would run just a little into January, right? Is that how you're reading it, Kim?
Mayor and council members, if you take a look at page 3, item number 5, it is pretty specific language outlining termination of an agreement. That also relates to a breach of the contract and written notice and a means to deal with that breach. So I just think that perhaps maybe could take some time.
Brian, could I ask the clerk a question?
Absolutely.
You have interaction with MinSpec, right? They come to you for whatever, permits and things like that, and then you have interaction with the residents of the city who come to you and things like that. So my question is, what, if any, have you heard from either MinSpec or the residents saying that, geez, we really, especially the residents, I would suspect, geez, what are these guys doing? Have you heard anything negative from the residents?
Mayor and council members, I guess I
for
would not
breach.
say I've heard anything negative whatsoever. I have heard some, very little bit frustration on residents' part about the time that it takes for a permit.
I can speak from my own experience, and I'm not saying anything out of school here because I had this conversation with two of the representatives from the company. For a while there, I thought they were too large for us because you would talk to one person about your application, and then another person reviews your application, and then another person inspects the field work, and then you may or may not get that same inspector when you have them back. So there was a lot of having to kind of retell the story. And in my particular case, I built a 1,000 square foot detached garage with no electric, no insulation, no power. It was a pretty straightforward, albeit too tall, right, John? It was a pretty straightforward project. And I felt like, come on, guys, this is the third or fourth time we've talked about this garage. But I shared that with them, and they were trying to have it so that fewer people touched it. But as I'm reading this, and I'm not a lawyer, I don't think we have to give 30 days notice. I think the contract expires the last day of December. The balance of that language is if we wanted to terminate early for cause, then we have to give 30-day notice. John's the only attorney that I know sitting here at the table. Do you agree with that, John?
Well, I gave up my license a few years back, but I'd agree with that. The way I read this, I can't believe that there's not another subsection in here that covers, the termination of the contract coming to an end, but there doesn't appear to be on a brief reading of it. So, to me, the term under subsection 5, termination of agreement, looks to me like it is strictly for cause or breach of contract.
So with that said, why don't we just table this until
Okay.
December? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I believe so, yeah.
So I make a motion that we table item C until December, and we invite Minspec to come speak with us if they'd like to. If anyone, wants to bring forward an alternative solution to this, we can look at that in December as well.
I mean, the last part of subsection 5 says if the breach is rectified, it says the last day of the agreement is the last day services will be provided. So, it doesn't, I haven't seen any place in here where it talks about that it automatically renews for 3 years or 2 years, or we don't even have a contract in front of us from them, saying that they wish
Yeah,
to.
this is the extension or whatever it is.
Right, yeah, so.
You'd have thought that they would have been on their calendar to come here to say, hey, guys.
She, in their defense, she has emailed me, which I've just forwarded to the clerk, and she left me a voice message. So that's why I think we invite them to the December meeting.
And I think they should be advised
Yeah.
that they have a contract with them so we can figure out whether it's
I
the
think they
exact
were
same.
proposing a 2-year extension from her voice message, but I haven't seen the contract. So we'll,
Did you need a second, or did you got to get a second already?
I think
No.
we had a second. Go ahead, second it again.
Third.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Schedule canvass of election meeting.
Mayor and council members, per state law, after an election, you have 3 to 10 days to certify the election. Quite honestly, it's a 30-second meeting that takes a majority of the council.
Simple majority, 3? Okay.
3 to 10 days puts you between the 9th and the 16th.
I'm in town all next week, so I'd
I'm
prefer to
gone
do
all
it.
next week.
And it doesn't have to be done here, right? It can be done pretty much anywhere.
It can. I would highly recommend that when you guys schedule this meeting, make that announcement, especially if it is at a different place, and it certainly can be. But that'll
You have to post it as a
satisfy
meeting.
your posting requirements.
By the ice machine at the Freedom Station.
And it can be any time. So we can do it during regular business or 5 o'clock or. So I'm available the 7th, the 8th.
Actually, the 8th and the 9th, I'm kind of probably going out of town.
Well, and I'm sorry, excuse me, Mayor, council members, you can't do it until the 9th. The 9th is the first,
First
Oh.
day we can do it.
yes.
So you're out then?
Yeah.
I
So-
could do it the 12th,
I can do it the 12th also.
And what day is that?
Monday.
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 That's fine.
Kim, where would you like to do that? Should we see if we can do it here? And can everybody make it earlier, like 4 o'clock?
Sure.
I'm good.
Okay, let's say 4 o'clock on the 12th.
Is that right with you, Randy?
If you only need 3,
Oh, yeah, that's true.
so, but
You
I
can't,
can,
you can't
I
make
can.
4? Okay.
But if you guys, but
Right.
if 3, you can do it. But if you,
Okay.
if somebody can't make it, try to get to me as soon as you can, because I would be able to, but if
Okay.
you only need 3, you don't need 4.
Well,
Okay.
That's assuming that we're reelected.
Yeah, you're only going to show up.
Because we're still, our term
Oh, yeah.
ends at the end of the year.
Right.
Mayor and council members, unless the facility for some reason is closed, I believe you absolutely can do it here.
Okay, so we're going to say 4 o'clock on the 12th.
And I'll be your backup if somebody can make it.
And are we gonna check with, I assume, we'll check with the city here to make sure it's gonna be open?
Do you have a code to get in?
Oh,
We used to
And it
have.
doesn't
a
even
code.
have to be here, you can just go in the back room.
We'll just post it,
Yeah,
make the announcement that it will be here.
that makes total sense.
Okay. It's official. Consideration of 2019 budget work session.
Mayor and council members, you did approve your preliminary budget at the September meeting. Keeping in mind that the preliminary budget, your final is done in December, you cannot increase your budget, but you can lower the budget. There was some discussion regarding working a little bit more on that budget. So before you is just the consideration if you want to set another budget work session prior to your regular December meeting, which you will be adopting your final budget and levy.
So I think the biggest item that maybe is up for debate is the potential loss of revenue for the liquor license. Shiners didn't renew their license this year. I've spoken to the owner, and he is starting efforts to sell his business. And I know for a fact that there's been a number of people kind of waiting to know what the opportunity is, what the price is, and there seems to be some interest. So right now, the $1,500 is not in our budget as revenue. But I think we have at least a 50-50 chance of getting that money. So it's a matter of if we want to take that risk or if we want to budget for not receiving the money. And obviously, if we do receive the money, we increase our general fund and budget for it accordingly the following year. Outside of that, I don't think there's anything in that budget that we haven't already talked about or we're clear on. So if you'd like a workshop, we certainly can have one, but I think we're down to just that one item.
I don't necessarily see a reason for it if it's $1,500, is that what you said?
Mhm.
We can always, just keep everything as it is, and if we have to, work within the budget to reallocate, rob Peter to pay Paul, basically, we can do that at any time.
Well, no, the budget that we preliminary approved doesn't show the income.
Right,
So our worst case scenario is we would receive the income,
right,
but we've already increased the budget.
got it.
That's the worst case scenario. The risk, if we wanted to take a risk, would be to put it back in as an income source and then not receive it. So I'm actually proposing that we just move forward with the budget as we set.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, and
Yeah.
then come January, February, March, whatever, all of a sudden things are getting a little out of hand, then we always can reallocate throughout the year. We don't have to change the levy, the budget, the blah, blah, blah. It's set. We just go, well, maybe, like, for example, maybe we've got an X number of dollars in for the legal fees. Well, we don't have any hardly legal fees, so we just take that and put it wherever it's needed, as an example.
Yeah, if we continue to not budget for the income, but we do receive it, we'll end up with more money then.
Exactly.
So I would say no workshop, but certainly an agenda item.
Mhm.
And with any luck, it's our only agenda item.
Well, we're gonna,
Got to have a holiday, a Christmas party.
well, we gotta have the minspec.
Yeah.
You're right about that. Point taken. Is everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. We'll move on to council and staff reports. City engineer. I spoke with John, and I, very candidly, I just asked him if he had any luck with the 3 questions that we'd asked him to check into regarding the water department. So he indicated to me that he had sent an email on September 10th, right after our September 6th meeting. It was directly to Mr. Stanton, who's the water department director. Asked him 3 specific questions. Is there third-party testing of the water system? And if so, how frequently is it done? And when was the most recent hydrant flushing that occurred? He just received a response yesterday, October 31st, from Mr. Stanton, and this is the reply. I just reviewed Lakeland Shores September City Council video concerning the 3 questions you asked to be answered by the Lakeland Water Utility. I'd like to be put on the December agenda to answer those questions and address other conversation by council members that took place that same meeting concerning the water quality, processes used for testing, and communication to the cities we supply water to. Signed, Jim Stanton, Public Works Commissioner. So we don't have answers to the 3 questions. It's been 2 months. Mr. Stanton would like to come a month from now to answer those 3 questions.
Let's invite him.
I'm not opposed to that. I mean, I'm never opposed to that. I guess I'm just a little bit concerned, to be very honest with you, and that my last conversation with Mr. Stanton, I lost my temper because I wasn't getting answers, and I rudely hung up on him, to which, I apologize. That wasn't the best behavior, but I just am striking out when it comes to getting basic answers, and I don't want to have this back and forth that's not productive. So honestly, that's my only hesitancy to getting together, and maybe a workshop is more productive than an open council meeting. But this kind of speaks to our concern that we ask a question and we really don't get a response. I mean, this will be 3 months later to 3 very specific, 3 very basic questions. That's exactly my point.
Could we do this, invite him to the next council meeting, but have someone, and if you want, I'd be happy to talk to him, or somebody else wants to, and ask him, hey, you're on for the council meeting, but could you come to a workshop before the council meeting instead? That might be a safe alternative to visit about that and to see get his reaction to that.
The other alternative is, there's 2 other communities that are impacted here, and the one community only has like 3 hookups. St. Mary's Point only has 3 citizens, I think, that are on their water system. But Lake St. Croix Beach is clearly a customer. So rather than having to be redundant, we did have a workshop before. John, do you recall how long ago? It was last year.
It was a year ago, a little over a year ago.
Yeah.
It'd
In
be
the
a year
summer.
and a half. It was early summer, early fall maybe, but
Yeah.
I remember having, I for some reason missed it, but I heard it was quite the interesting meeting.
It started off a little contentious, but, I think we stayed to the facts and
Very
we
good.
stayed civil and we got good information. So I think rather than doing it in a council meeting, maybe we respectfully request our annual workshop and that we invite the other communities to just have an open forum and an open discussion. I guess I'd prefer that to a council meeting.
fine.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. It gets rather contentious. I mean, there's some ill feelings apparently on numerous, from numerous people about this particular thing. My main concern is we never get any information. Now, maybe it's out there and I'm just oblivious to where I'm supposed to look for it. But I think those of us that are concerned about the water quality, and I'm not suggesting in any way that it is deficient, that what I would like to know on a more regular basis as a city council person that's representing the constituents of Lakeland Shores, how it is that we're supposed to know what the test results show.
Right.
And how often it's done. And it just seems to me that if they're not prepared to get into some situation in which perhaps there's an advisory board where we might actually get some information on a regular basis and have somebody from the city council that might actually know something about the system once they've been educated on it, that at least there ought to be some regular way of posting the results and who did the testing and when the next test is going to take place. And I think that's pretty basic.
And I think frankly, sorry to interrupt
Yeah.
you, I think that protects them as much as anyone.
I'll jump in. I had a conversation with Jim Stanton about this, and it started off contentious. It did. We're both on the fire board, and I said, Jim, I'm not calling you out here. And he said that how did he say it? He said that the required documentation is on the Minnesota Department of Health's website. And I said, Jim, that's fine, but what is that? Is that the yearly average or the mean, or what is it? I mean, what is it? And he said, well, I think he knew where I was going, and he says, well, we do have the regular tests. And I said, well, why can't we get at that? I said, what is a regular test? He said, that's the every other day stuff or daily stuff. He pulls water, he sets it aside, they have an engineer come in and take it and test it, is what it boils down to. Now, I don't know the cycle on when he comes in. I think it's weekly, but don't hold me to that.
I think they could do it as frequently as daily. They may be. But
Well, they pull the water daily.
Yeah,
But
but
when he
here-
comes in
Yeah,
is where,
here's the problem, is that the licensed operator of the system, and I don't even know who that is now. For a while, it was a consultant from SEH.
Yep.
I think they're using another contractor now. But I don't even know who that is, and frankly, we should know who that is.
but I
It's-
guess, well, go ahead.
It falls on whoever that licensed operator is
Yes.
to be responsible for the reporting and the testing. I think in this particular case, because that licensed operator is not on site every day, that Jim and or someone else with the city, again, I have no idea, is taking the daily tests, recording it in a log, and then at a later date, the licensed operator reviews that and submits it to the state.
And what I was going to say is that daily log, the city clerk has access to it. And so that's where he pointed me to, is to call the city clerk. And I haven't done that, and I can, but it's just, Andy has this file that says, here are our results. Now,
So this
That-
is where I get myself in trouble, because you could show me that log, this could be that log.
Right.
For all I know. I don't know what I'm looking at.
yeah,
And I don't know if the person that's entering that data knows or
What they're
doesn't
looking
know.
at, what?
So that's why we asked, third party. How often does a third party come in, sample, to know? It'd be similar to a financial audit, it'd be similar to, any other check and balance.
well, I look at this as very similar to a lot of medical tests where, you have a range that you're supposed to drop into.
Right.
And I believe, but like I said, I haven't talked to Andy specifically, and I haven't seen the report, but I will chase that report this month. And if I get something, I will forward it to everybody.
Yeah, I mean, again, I wouldn't even know how to interpret it.
Right, and that's the point, is that hopefully
All I
that,
want to know is our water's safe.
if that high and low, the range thing is involved in that recording, You know, like it says, okay, here's your iron content, this is where you're supposed to be. And as obvious as some days we have a little more iron than we really want in our waters, has come to fruition a few times. But, I mean, I will track that down. I'll talk to Andy and see.
But I'm just going to continue to play devil's advocate. I'm not pointing fingers at anyone, okay?
Yeah.
But just like we don't have our payments come in and one person open the mail and record those payments and then pay your bills, you know, there's generally accepted accounting principles, separation of duties and responsibilities, so that you have this checks and balance. And I'm concerned we may not have that. And I'm not saying
I don't disagree
I'm not
with
saying
you.
anyone's doing anything wrong, but that's where an independent third party
Right.
protects everybody.
Right.
It protects
And-
whoever that individual is.
I know they have hired another part-time public works guy. The name got fired by, and I can't.
Worth?
What?
I thought I heard Simon Worth.
Could be, yeah.
I don't know if
He's on the fire department. He's not, he's a laborer. He's not
Okay.
qualified at any,
Right. Right.
level, but, and so they now have a part-time guy that's working there. Once again, we don't know what exactly is going on, but I will talk to Andy and I will try to find out. I mean, if I can just see a copy of this report, that's gonna tip off a couple of things right there.
But you know, even that, knowing who is working and who we should contact, you know, if there's an issue. There was a time when I called Jim, I didn't reach Jim, so I called the city said call Jim. You know, it all seems to filter to Jim. And God forbid something happens to Jim, or
Well, yeah.
let's say he takes a trip and decides to take a break.
I mean,
I don't even know who else is
Right.
involved.
And I totally agree with you. I've had the same issue with the fire department on a couple issues, and
Yeah.
I always say that it's, okay, where are the hit by a bus procedures?
Yeah.
And they look at me like, what do you mean? I said, well, if I'm doing this and I get hit by a bus, who knows how to do it?
Right.
Where's the procedures? And they all kind of looked at me like, never thought of that,
Right.
you know, so
It's nothing personal.
Yeah.
I just would like to have a little bit better understanding and a little bit more
I
confidence.
think that one of us might, not necessarily volunteering at this, but might actually look at the joint powers agreement to,
I've done that.
if somebody can get me another copy of it, I'm not sure I have
I can
one.
get you a copy.
I'd like to take a look at it, just to see what the responsibility of the parties that are involved in that agreement are, you know, what we can expect, at least out of the agreement.
hmm
And at least that, if there's anything that we can expect out of it, that we ought to be able to get that information. I'm more concerned with, there's all sorts of pollutants out there that are coming our way from different waste sites, and I'm not suggesting that people aren't testing for that, but it'd be interesting to know if they are testing for it. I have no clue if they are.
I can speak to that
Okay.
because I did attend those meetings, and we have consequently been invited to have a representative at the 3M fund meetings and the, Kim, do you recall? I forwarded that to you, the notice. I'm going to forget the technical three initial definition, but there are two pollutants. One was from Ray's Truck Stop.
Right.
We're not in the plume area for those. They have been testing both the city wells, which got an all clear, and they've been testing random wells within our city and adjoining cities. We're not in those plume areas. The pollutant that's a result of the 3M pollution settlement, that's much broader in its impact because a lot of that material was deposited in different waste sites. So it's not like it originated at 3M, it's actually originating from the dump sites. So they are now starting to test for that in our community and neighboring communities. They have already tested the city wells, and both of those are clear.
Okay.
They're deep enough and clear.
I can tell you, though, but it's kind of a changing proposition here.
Absolutely.
Because we used to live on Indian Trail in Afton for 25 years, and the well that at our house has now been declared
Mhm.
Well,
Contaminated.
Same thing has happened to me, but it's,
And apparently that plume is going north of Lake Edith, okay, and,
That's a 3M plume.
right.
Yep.
And, but it hadn't been there,
No,
5 years ago.
right.
well, I think the other thing too is that the standards keep changing.
Yeah, right, they lower them.
Yeah, my well at my house from 84 at the time, and I don't remember what it was right now, I think it was VOCs, but it was 6 parts per million.
Mhm.
And then back 7 years ago, it came back and it was they changed it to 0.6. My well was in spec, didn't change, but was out of spec, so that happens too.
No.
So, Tom, I heard you volunteer earlier.
I'm gonna talk to Andy. And
What
see-
I'd like you to volunteer for, though, is to see if you could respectfully request an annual workshop like we did last year.
Okay, I will talk to Jim.
And see if they're
I'm not gonna
willing
see
to
him for a
invite
while, but I'll give him a call.
Lake St. Croix Beach, whoever was invited last year, if we could invite those same people. Informal. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
As long as we're on city engineer, this kind of falls into your category, John. What do we think we're gonna do next year for street repairs or street projects?
I think what we asked John Perotti to look into was 4th Street between this Afton Lakeland School and the top of the hill there, if that's Quinlan.
Yep.
Which is pretty bad, and which we didn't do anything to this year purposely,
Yep.
with the idea that he'd be getting bids this February. And I don't know, I haven't talked to him at all as to whether or not whether it's too early or whether he, is on it.
Okay.
But
So
he-
that's more
he
of a
is-
repair project than it is a replacement or a,
No, that's.
it's
grind-
full.
That's
grind-
grinded, yeah,
grind-
that's-
Mill overlay.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
the, how shall I say it? That's
This-
the only strip we have with rumble strips on it.
Yeah.
Right.
Would you mind seeing if you could connect with him before
Okay.
next month and
Right, I
just
will.
see what his schedule and thoughts are on that?
Yeah, because I assume they're gonna have to do some work, preliminary work, before it goes out for bids.
Yeah. Okay.
And the bids, I think, are normally February.
I think they try to do them earlier, and I don't know, sometimes we bid with other communities. I don't know if he's
Right.
proposing that or not. Okay, city clerk.
Before we do that,
Yep.
could we turn our bicycle around and go back to the water issue for a brief moment?
Mhm.
Taking the counterintuitive point of view in that Tom is going to go talk with Jim to see if there can be a workshop in lieu of Jim coming to the meeting.
Mhm.
Okay? Okay. Just so, because I'm thinking that Tom will really have to be ready for, well, Tom, why don't you want me to come to the meeting? Type deal. So, okay,
Because Lake St. Croix Beach won't be there.
all right.
Well, and I guarantee you that they'll watch this meeting. So
I suppose.
they'll have a full understanding of our thought process.
Very good. Okay,
We,
moving on.
we just think it'll be more productive
Yeah, very good.
and a little bit friendlier.
I mean, we won't need security.
Well, no, I'll be on my best behavior. Kim?
Mayor and council members, I included your open building permit report in your packets, as well as the police reports that were received for the month of October. I only had one other thing, campaign financials for those of you that are running for the seats. I don't know that you've spent more than $750. If you have, we should have that campaign financial. If you have not and don't plan on doing that, we would just need the final report that says you have not spent that much, and we could collect them at after the election.
That was in our election packet information, right?
Yep,
Yep.
page 17.
Okay,
So we can give that to you next month?
No, I would get them in within a week after the election. It's just a final that says you did not spend more than $750.
yeah. It looks like a small
But
newspaper.
how are we going to get it to you?
Could you scan and email it?
I think you can do it online straight to the state, too.
Yeah, I think I remember doing, okay, so help me with, okay, so now I gotta write this down and I gotta do some, it's the what again?
Campaign financial report, it's the final. You're just checking a box that
Yep.
states you have not spent more than 750.
And I believe I remember doing that on the website,
Mhm.
in the packet, on the website. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And do it after the election, but 7 days.
You can do it now too. I mean, it just says how much you've spent, but
Oh,
you
okay.
can't spend anything after you submit the report.
Got it, okay. Very good.
And
Okay.
if I've lost my packet, I can get another form from somebody?
Yes. Absolutely. Just email me. I'll get it to you. You didn't lose your packet. It's very important.
We'll move on to council member reports then. You know, more of the same with the WMO, the Washington County Conservation District, which is who we contract our administration and staff support services through, just continues to do an awesome job for us. The county just can't say enough about how great of a job the WMO does. It's 10 communities. It's an advisory board. We don't have any taxing authority. We've fought hard to make sure we don't have any taxing authority. Our annual budget is about $130,000, but we get a significant amount of money in grants, so it's not unusual for a total of $400,000 to pass through our account. But the tax-paying citizens are paying $130,000, where I think the next closest organization, they're all watersheds. We're one of the only few remaining joint powers agreements. The next closest budget is about $1 million. And some of them creep up into the $4, $5, $6, $7, $8 million. But they have taxing authority. So we're doing a heck of a job. And I wished I could take credit for it, but so much of it comes from the administrator that we contract for through Washington County Conservation District. And then out of the 10 communities, they're all involved and they're all active and they attend the monthly meetings, and we actually have quite a bit of fun and get a lot done. So that's all I have. Mayor Randy, sorry. Someday I'll stop calling you.
Whatever. Just don't call me late for happy hour.
Yep.
No special report, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Schroeder's not here this evening. John?
I want to extend an apology to those people that live certainly up on the 4th Street, Quinlan area. There was a stop sign down in September there, and I left for 3 weeks to go back to what I consider my home in New Hampshire. And I guess it was Tim Schroeder had indicated to me at the city council meeting on the 7th, I believe it was, that the sign was down, that he had, and I left the next day without tending to it, and I came back 3 weeks later, and actually when he told me about it, I wasn't even sure where it was at, but 3 weeks later it was still down, and so I got on it at that time, and thanks to Tim, who had a partial piece of pole, a 6-foot piece, and I spent quite a bit of time looking for the part that was broken off, with a kid's Geiger counter, trying to find it, and I couldn't find it. So luckily Tim had that section of pole, and I put the two together and put it back in place, and it seems to be standing still. Despite the fact that I didn't go probably more than 2 feet because I was afraid of what was down there wherever I was putting it. So once again, I apologize to the constituents because it was on the ground, which is ugly enough, but there was also not a stop sign there. So
Well, we all took a run at that, just so you know.
Okay.
I tried calling Ben a couple of times, but his voicemail was full, and then it fell off my radar screen. I think you and Tim were prepared to take a run at it, but then I think John was back in town. So, yeah, it just goes to show you that relatively simple things sometimes take a while. That's government. 3 weeks for a stop sign, that's not
Quick
too bad.
question, John. Why were you using a Geiger counter to try to find the pole?
Metal.
Metal detector, maybe.
Because it was
We're
radioactive.
using a Geiger.
It was radioactive.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He
It
was
was. I was
doing
hoping-
some mining.
Well, it was strange because I expected that there would be a stub left in the ground.
There had to be, but if you were using a Geiger counter, it's not going to find it.
Well, needless to say, whether it was a Geiger counter or the other,
Yeah,
It was,
we have one.
it didn't find anything. And,
I did bring a couple scrap sections back for you, so if
okay.
it happens again, we have more replacement
and
parts.
I can only assume that the person that knocked it over will be contacting us shortly to.
Reimburse us?
Yeah,
the-
gotta have dreams.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. You know, at some point in time, I'd like to meet them, because I suspect that had I been able to reach him, that he could have
Right.
gone over there and repaired that for us.
Yeah, I'm sure.
For all the
he will.
years he's provided service for us, I've never had the opportunity to meet him, so, at some point. Tom?
A couple things on the fire department. We are beginning to explore how we plan to staff the fire department during the daytime hours. And we're looking probably at 2021 or 2022. Our 2 daytime employees that are volunteers are looking at retiring in that time frame, and since we don't have a lot of firefighters that are located in the valley during the day, it's going to become an issue at some point, and determination has been made that we should start looking at possible options. Lake Elmo has gone to a Monday through Friday 2-man crews from 6 hours, 6 in the morning to noon and noon to 6 at night to cover emergencies. That's just an option that we're looking at. That gets us into a whole lot of other things that I really don't want to spend a lot of time on, but it's going to be very difficult to stay within the 5%. So then do we become a legitimate fire district where we no longer go to the cities, we go directly to the tax statements? We got into that conversation. So there's a lot of water that's going to go over that dam between now and then. The other thing is,
Can I
yeah,
interrupt you? I've never had the courage to ask the question. Has anybody ever looked at a regional department, kind of like the sheriff's office, but for fire? Because it seems like all the communities have discussed staffing issues.
they have what they currently call, let me rephrase that. They have a process now with 911
Yeah.
dispatch. It's called auto call.
Yep.
And that says that if I have a confirmed structure fire on 18 in Manning,
It's kind of a joint powers
right,
agreement. or it's a
everybody,
neighboring community.
Woodbury responds.
Yeah, no, I know we have that.
Yeah.
I just meant,
Yeah.
I mean,
And there have
one chief that would be in charge of 4 stations or something. You know, almost like St. Paul clearly doesn't have one fire station. They
No,
must have
no.
20 of them.
Yeah.
Have we ever looked at more of a county-wide or a regional?
Well, that's when you get into a fire district kind of thing, and that's one of the options in that environment, is that you take all those away from the municipality and you create a fire district, is kind of what it is.
Yeah, I would think we'd have to have a larger organization in order for there
Right.
to be some cost effectiveness.
And it's, there's incompatibilities in coverage currently today. Currently today, Bayport and Stillwater and Lake Elmo do not do ambulance service of any kind. They do, whether it's advanced life support or basic life support, they contract it all through Lakeview Hospital. And we have a contract with Lakeview Hospital for advanced life support. There are things we get dispatched to that we are not licensed to handle, and so that's. But yeah, creating a fire district, much you kind of came at it from a station end, but that's basically what it is. Is you call it whatever you want to call it, the St. Croix Valley Fire District, and it's it's Lake Elmo and Bayport and ourselves and maybe Hastings. It could be extend that way, because Hastings does Denmark for us,
Right.
or they do Denmark for themselves. They contract it.
So that's the big puzzle that you're starting to work on.
Right,
and
they're starting to
try
look at
figure out.
that now, because it's going to become, the other issue that we keep running into is that fewer and fewer employers are willing to
Support it.
let their employees go to a fire call. It's just not part of the norm anymore. And it's unfortunate. I mean, Bayport, Anderson Windows is more, supports it, and 3M still does, but there's a lot of places that you just don't see that happening anymore.
Yeah, it's harder to get people.
Right, and we're authorized for 32, and we currently have 26, and we're doing, we're covering everything, but we'll hire. I mean, we have had the hiring sign out for 2 years now, and we hire somebody, they get a different job, they go away. It's been a nonstop. It's been uphill.
Okay.
Okay, the
So you're
second,
working on that.
yeah, the second thing is that we have, I'm going to give you a brief description. We have a full-time chief who staffs the fire department during the day and drives the vehicle. And then we have duty officers which cover the 5 o'clock at night to 8 o'clock in the morning issue coverage. Our chief does not cover that. Now, he does get called out to those. It does happen. But anyway, they both are driving fire department vehicles currently. The problem is that the chief is always driving now it's called Brush 2. It's a grass rig. I would say it is probably the most inefficient vehicle we have that's under a fire truck in the shop. It's a big pickup with a 400-gallon water tank on it, and it's not an efficient vehicle that to do the fire safety presentation at the school and that kind of stuff. And then he's been letting the duty officer at night take the SUV, which is usually the first vehicle out of the one we've normally seen at. They're looking at reworking the vehicle purchase schedule so they can have 2, and I'll use the term duty vehicles, they're SUVs. And it's not going to have an impact on anything other than they're going to put off one vehicle and accelerate another one, and there's going to be no cost to the city. I just want to kind of give you guys a heads up that you're probably going to start seeing 2 non-fire equipped vehicles, and I'm using that term very loosely, running around the valley, and it looks like we're going to do something here in the next year. So
Will it still stay on the?
it'll look the same. It's the same kind of deal, and it's just an SUV. And I shouldn't say it's just an SUV. We get those with carpet delete and radio delete, and we get them through the consortium. And I know the last one we bought, I think we bought it's a Chevy Tahoe, and I think we got it for $31,000, which is pretty damn cheap for a full-size SUV. And so anyway, we're going to extend some, but it's not going to impact. I just want you guys to know that, and our citizens to know that there's going to be, and it's just better to serve what they do. So anyway, that's it.
Okay. Thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Can I make one quick thing to go back to my report? I do want to publicly thank the city treasurer and the city clerk for putting together a strategy so that we're able to get our checks this evening. Thank you very much.
I'll second it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We're adjourned. What's the strategy?